The Douglas Coleman Show is made possible with support from Seth David Radwell, a recent guest on the program and author of American Schism, How the Two Enlightenments Hold the Secret to Healing Our Nation, released this past July. As Publishers Weekly writes in its recent glowing book life review of American Schism, business executive Radwell's epic debut examines the historical influences that have led to what he sees as the collapse of politics in the United States. Seth Radwell makes the case that the current chasm between the American right and left can be traced back to the 18th century's Age of Enlightenment and the basic tenets of liberty, equality, and reason. American Schism provides a historical perspective that can help us fight today's unreason with reason and bridge current-day divides. American Schism by Seth David Radwell is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and wherever books are sold. For more information, go to AmericanSchismBook.com.
It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome back to the Douglas Coleman Show, Terry Shepard. Hey, Terry, welcome back.
It's great to talk to you again, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Nice to talk to you as well. When were you on the show the last time? I can't remember.
You know, I think we're coming up on our 1-year anniversary because
has it been that
we
long?
talked about Vega. It had just come out. So, yeah, it's about time. You know, this is like an annual thing.
Well, I know I see you on Facebook a lot, and so I never feel like people that are on there that are doing a lot of posts and things, I never feel like they're really far away. You know?
Yeah. I mean, that's and if you're doing engagement right, you feel like they're talking to you. I love reading your stuff, and as you know, I don't just hit the like button. I'll comment on it, and we've gotten into some pretty cool conversations on Facebook about stuff.
Yeah, I can't remember which was the one that we kind of went on for a while. What was the post?
It might have been music related since we have that other thing in common.
Okay. Yeah, it could be.
I go down so many rabbit holes with people over there that it's hard to remember which ones. Today I'm thinking about, they announced that our Dean Taylor passed away, and I remember him well. I knew him when he was working at Motown writing. He wrote Love Child for the Supremes, and his one he had, of course, was Indiana Wants Me.
Oh.
And I knew about that one because my radio cohort, Scotty Regan from WKNR, was the guy in the bullhorn at the end saying, "This is the police. You are surrounded. Give yourself up." So he was 82. Yeah, he had a long life.
Well, geez, they're dropping at Motown then, because Ronnie Spector just died like 2 days ago, right?
Ronnie did, yeah. The guy who was who sang lead for the Platters on "With This Ring" passed away today. I mean, it's I guess it's not surprising, because a lot of these people that are 10, 15 years older than we are getting into that actuarial time where the pages turn. But I don't like it. I don't. I keep thinking every time I hear Incense and Peppermints that it's a hit. It's as fresh as if it came out yesterday. And I don't know if you saw my post about all the albums that are turning 51 this year. Stephen Still's Manassas. I mean, there's a whole bunch of ones that are way, way too familiar.
That's scary. It is going by very quickly. I mean, the idea that we haven't spoken a year, and it seems like we just spoke, because I know when John sent me the email, John and I work remotely, and he sends me the emails for the guests for that day. So when I get up, I look and I say, who's on, and look at the schedule, and it says, oh, Terry Shepard. I thought, geez, I just talked to him. And, it's but happy to have you back. So you've got a book out now called Students in Time. This is your latest book, yeah?
That's the new one, yeah. That kind of, for a guy who likes to plan things, my writing career has kind of just been like a pinball. I started out with the Jessica Ramirez stuff, but I was giving my grandson a ride home from school, and he asked me what I did for a living. And I said, I wrote books. And he says, well, you write one where I can be a star. So I went to talk to his fourth grade teacher, and I said, what's the biggest challenge you've got right now? And she said, getting kids excited about history. Nobody cares about Sir Walter Raleigh. So the concept we came up with was to do a time travel, a sci-fi thing, where we basically took every one of the lessons from history that year, starting with that part in time, the Jamestown colony and all that stuff, Virginia Dare, up to the Battle of Yorktown. And we created chapters where Hudson and one of his female classmates go back in time with their teacher to actually witness the events that in person. And that has put a whole new spin on history and made it, apparently, I'm selling a lot of them, accessible for kids who are of the video game age and aren't excited about something unless there's something blowing up in the middle of it.
Well,
it was fun.
This sounds an awful lot like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Well, it's the rules of time travel that I wrote was first that there was you could never have a paradox. That there's nothing you could do that could change history, but you could be injured back there. Things could happen to you physically. So there are a couple of close calls that they have, especially during when they're behind the lines in the Revolutionary War, that give a little bit of excitement to it. But this whole thing of being able to feel like you're actually immersed in the actual historic events, I guess it worked. I mean, it was just an idea I had and put the thing together. It was very easy to do because she gave me the PowerPoints for each of her lessons, and there were 13 or 14 of them, and each one became a chapter. And the test questions are at the end. So when Hudson comes back, he says, wow, Maria, what I want to remember about meeting George Washington is this. And that, of course, is the first question on the test. So if the kids read the book, then they're going to do just fine.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Okay, so it's written in first person then?
No, it's written in third person, but there is a ton of dialogue. I mean, the kids basically are reacting to all these things from their age, from the fourth grade point of view. And Ms. Keefe, who is their teacher in real life and who's their kind of docent for the time travel stuff, explains from an adult perspective how some of these things work. But if you are a kid, it reminds me a little bit of My Side of the Mountain meets Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It's kind of a mix of those two things with a little bit of Wrinkle in Time thrown in for seasoning.
Oh, okay. All right.
I don't know if it'll be a bestseller, but I will sell a bunch every year to fourth graders because it's built on the actual national curriculum for fourth grade history, and is a really interesting way to augment without having to do it the boring way, I guess.
Is this your first children's book?
No, it's actually how many? It's the third one. I started out by writing a detective thing that was going to be a series for Hudson, with Hudson as the Sherlock Holmes character. And I was taking the plots from the public domain Sherlock Holmes stories and rewriting them from a kid's perspective. And that was fun. I could do some more of that, but he kind of got bored with that. And then COVID came along, and that's when Mystery Bug happened. That was kind of the miracle thing. Our granddaughter Juliette has Down syndrome, and she kind of looks at the world in a unique way. She's 5 years old now, but she was 3.5 when the pandemic started, and she and her brother were asking us all kinds of questions. They were terrified about COVID. So I decided to write a Dr. Seuss style picture book for them that explained social distancing and how to make a mask. Back when I first wrote the book, there weren't masks. You couldn't get masks. So I contacted the Centers for Disease Control and asked their doctors and Fauci's office and stuff, how we're going to do this right. How should I write it? So I basically took their guidance and put it in a green eggs and ham tetramic pentameter poetic style. And my son-in-law, who's a fantastic illustrator, did all the pictures, and it became a 3-book series that's now a collection. We call it the Mystery Bug, the Complete Collection. First book is about hand washing and nose blowing. Second one's about masking and social distancing, and the third one is vaccine science. So it's that one has taken off. It's become an underground hit. I'm seeing it in doctors' offices. I must have read that thing to close to 200 different classes.
Wow.
Wow. And not all just, elementary school either. The neat thing about it is that in 7th grade, the core curriculum has a poetry dimension to it. So they're using that book for 7th graders as kind of like a real time, it's a thing that's happening now. It's not like reading something from 100 years ago. And they're using that as their tetramic pentameter example. So that I never expected to have that be a big seller. I made one of them basically for my kids and grandkids, and the neighbors wanted it, and then the city wanted it, and then the schools wanted it. And before I knew it, I had a guy in Washington, D.C. selling them in bulk. So I actually have a lobbyist walking around D.C. right now, working with the Department of Education and some of the other government agencies to talk about much broader distribution, because it's sneaking. I'm getting emails from all over the place where they're showing me pictures of this little purple book, Dr. Seuss type book, in a doctor's office with some kid reading it. And that's kind of how it goes. We try so hard to, all the people you've talked to have worked for years to try and get on the New York Times bestseller list. And then something like this happens, and I wrote the whole thing. Maybe it took me 2 hours to do all 3 of those chapters. And, it's been the right book at the right time.
Sometimes that's all it takes. I mean, and that's not to discredit anything else that you've written or anything else you've done, but sometimes it's just that moment. And, similarly with my VE show, the video edition show, we started it just at the right time with COVID, and we got inundated with people to come on the show. And then it built itself, on the backs of all of the people that have been on. We just did our 341st production, and that's a little bit over a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that is, you're doing more than one a day then, right? Because you got them in the pipeline.
Well, sometimes there's 2 a day. I try not to do more than one, but sometimes scheduling, it just happens. I mean, we're booked 6 weeks out at this point, but some people don't like to wait, so we try to accommodate them when we can.
Well, I have my own opinion about why I think you're so successful, but what's your sense about why that particular video format has taken off and become so popular with the audience?
Probably because no one has seen that format since Edward R. Murrow, who did it exactly like that 70 years ago.
Yes.
So I think that, most of the people on the planet now are too young to even remember that. It's interesting because Murrow did it without all of the technology that we have now. And I think it was amazing that he could even pull that off to begin with. But it's just a format that I fell in love with. I wish that there were better quality recordings of what he did, because it's all kinescope and it all looks like shit. They weren't smart like Desi Arnaz and do it with 3-camera film where they could 50 years later digitally remaster it and it looks better than it did. So he, unfortunately, and he did it live, which was beyond my comprehension at this point, to figure out how they could do it live in the 1950s without videotape, without satellites, without internet. I mean, all they had at that point for technology was they finally got the coaxial feeds coast to coast, but which would eventually become cable television, 20 some odd years later. But the coaxial feeds were direct from NBC, CBS, and ABC from coast to coast, from LA to New York. So he could do a live show sitting in the studio in New York City with somebody in LA. In fact, most of his guests were Hollywood people. But they would do it 2 weeks in advance. They would send the camera crew out there with their portable cameras. There's a picture I put up on Facebook years ago of Marilyn Monroe's interview on his show from her house in Hollywood. And they brought in like 5 portable cameras. These cameras were as big as a phone booth, and say, oh, those were the portable ones. I'd hate to see the ones that were studio planted. God. But, and these monster cables that looked like fire hoses running all across her living room. And I mean, it's just like, oh, and this is the portable setup, So I have to laugh at that. But they did it.
And those things took a while to warm up. If you remember on the day that Kennedy was shot, they didn't have any cameras turned on in the newsroom. So that's why the first bulletins were audio only over a slide, because it took them, I think, 37 minutes was the shortest time back then to get one of those image orthicons to warm up to where you could actually use it. And I'm looking at that picture right now. I think it's the one you're talking about where Marilyn's sitting on the circular
sofa thing. Yeah.
And there are those 2 huge RCA with the rack lenses on them.
Oh, yeah.
No zooms. They got the 3 or 4 rack lenses.
Right. So they brought 5 of those into her house and positioned them in various places so that when she walked through the house. See, even that's cooler than what I'm doing, because I would love to have that ability to have the guest be able to give us a tour. But, that's not really why they're on my show, not to give us a tour of their house. But it's just, that's cool that they can do that and that they did that. What I can't quite figure out, though, is how they heard Murrow, because obviously they didn't see him. So it must have been a telephone connection.
Yep.
Now, did they have wireless back then?
No, it was all AT&T. And there was, the thing that's different between satellite and coax is that there's a delay because you're going up so high in the air to get that geosynchronous orbit that there's, I think it's 1.7 up and another 1.7 down. So when you're watching those live shots on the news and they throw it to the reporter, there's always that delay. And those of us who have been in production are saying, come on. It's latency, and you don't have latency with wires. That was the great thing about the telephone cables and the networks was if there was, it was almost not noticeable over that length of, coast to coast. There was probably a little bit just because of the nature of the coaxial cables, the physics. But my memory of my research from that was that they had, she had an earpiece in and it was going to a phone line, which was basically the only difference between broadcast quality lines back then and regular telephone lines was that they dumbed down the telephone line quality. They put filters in that limited the bandwidth. So what they had to do for broadcast is it was the same line, same copper, but they pulled the filters out. So you got the full bandwidth. And back then that full bandwidth was nowhere near 15 kilohertz audio, which is what the network quality stuff is now. It was more like 6. So it sounded like a glorified phone line back then.
Oh, I see. So that's how they recorded her audio.
Yep. And it was, as I remember reading the Murrow biography, maybe you remember this too, person to person was the concession that he made to Bill Paley so that he could continue to See It Now.
Yeah.
Because he was the star. So all of that stuff was scripted. Everything that he had, the guest knew. I remember reading in Dick Clark's autobiography when he was on Person to Person, they were going to ask about his record collection. He didn't have any records at that point in time. So he called all his buddies at the business and said, I need some stuff. Because they expect you as a disc jockey to have records,
Yeah.
But it was all, scripted. And if you watch the JFK interview, which is available on YouTube, you can tell. Because he says, what's that boat behind your desk? And he says, oh, that's the PT-109 with blah, 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 blah. And there was the soundbite associated with that where he told the story.
Well, I knew the whole show was scripted. They would have to be just because of moving people around. They knew where the cameras had to be positioned and where the star was going to go. But he did have a way of making it seem like it was impromptu. I think that was his talent.
See, that's what I love about what you do. Because it feels like when I'm at my best on a podcast interview with somebody, it feels like we're just sitting across from each other at a Starbucks talking shop.
Yeah.
And you have that wonderful vibe. You make every one of your guests feel very comfortable. And on the video thing, it is, I had not thought about the comparison to person, but it is very much like that, what happened back then.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm the first to admit that that's where we stole it from. In fact, even on my website, on the VE show page, I put, we were inspired by Edward R. Murrow.
Yeah.
And I put a picture up that has a screen capture of Murrow interviewing Marlon Brando and then me interviewing Bill Obrist Jr. So you can see how, okay, obviously it looks updated, it's in color, it's a flat screen TV. I'm not sure what they were using in the studio for that big screen. It could have been a projection, or my understanding, I think, was that Murrow didn't even actually see Brando, or he saw him on a little monitor, but he was looking up and pretending that the picture, the image was where it was broadcast. I don't know. I'm not positive.
If you watch, oh my gosh, what's Good Night and Good Luck, the that film with David Strait there and his Murrow.
Seen that.
That's pretty accurate. He did have a monitor across because he was on, he was on the side. That the opening shot was of him sitting in the chair like you do and looking over at the big screen. But what he was actually doing was looking at a little monitor off to the side. I can't remember if they were projecting it on there or not. I know they had the technology to do it then, but I'm not sure that they did. I think there was some smoke and mirrors going on.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, did they even have chroma key back then where they could do that?
It was, what they did was they did a partial crossfade. They knew how to do fades between channels. So you would see the main, and like if you go through half of a dissolve, but you don't have the ability to take out the other picture, you see the main picture gets dark, and just enough, there's a black background and then the white letters, and just enough of that comes up so you can see the name. And it looks, that's how you can tell on some of these early sports broadcasts that are still in circulation, that are now available. Who had one? Crosby had one of a World Series. He was traveling, and he wanted, to watch the World Series game. So he had somebody kinescope it, and it's now available from Major League Baseball. You can order it as a DVD, and it's fascinating because on one track they've got the TV commentators, on the other audio track they got the radio guys, which I love listening to the two of them. But it is, when they show the score, the picture would get darker because they'd half dissolve just enough to be able to get whatever the message was they wanted on there.
Okay, well, that makes sense. When you said Crosby, did you mean Bing or David?
Bing.
Okay.
Yeah, Bing. I mean, Bing was behind Ampex. He was the guy that.
Oh, right.
The whole reason we have tape, audio tape, is because he didn't want to do his shows live. He wanted to be able to fix mistakes, so he invested in Ampex. And ended up investing in what became the quadruplex videotape recorder, the reel-to-reel videotape recorders, the early ones there.
Yeah, I've seen those. They're massive.
And that's just to keep those things going. When I grew up in Ann Arbor, and one of our family friends ran the University of Michigan Television Center, so I hung around there as a kid, and they had like 4 engineers just keeping all of the wheels and everything turning on that thing.
Well, you know what was great about those is that you didn't need to buy heat because they were so hot that the room did not require any heat at all. So in the winter, you were plenty warm next to that thing.
And noisy. I mean, talk about sound baffling. You'd walk through that door from the control room into the tape room, and it was like a jet engine was going on.
And it's funny.
They had now, compressors and stuff. It was amazing.
And now all of that technology fits in the palm of your hand in a phone.
Well, yeah, and you can actually, there are platforms for what we do that allow you to talk to your guests with them being on their phones. I mean, the cameras are so good now on those things that you almost can't tell. Some of them are better than what we see when we're looking at them on what's on their laptop.
Oh, I agree. In fact, I've done many of my VE show interviews with people on an iPhone, and it's actually better quality, the picture, generally speaking, than people's laptops, because people have invested in buying new phones where they haven't bought new laptops. So a lot of people's laptop may be 8, 9, 10 years old, and they might have a 5 megapixel camera, But if they've bought a recent iPhone, they've got 20 plus megapixels, and it has, well, it's set up for that. I mean, those phones are designed to do that. Laptop computers really are not. And I've had more trouble with people trying to get their tech set up who are using a laptop than the ones that just put their phone on a little stand on their desk and sat there. I've done some great interviews with just people on phones. So,
well,
yes.
they got to stay close, so they got decent audio, so they're always in frame too. You don't have to worry about that.
Right.
It's so
And then
much fun. Yeah.
if they plug in a $10 pair of earbuds with the little mic on the line, sounds even better. The one thing about iPhones that I don't like when using it in that kind of a application is iPhone has this like a mute switch that's auto. So if I'm talking and the guest tries to talk either over me or at the same time, it cuts out. You don't hear them. And so when you're doing the audio editing, it's a little bit odd. You know, it's like talking on the old CB wireless where you have to actually stop what you're saying in order for their audio to come through. Where on laptop computers, it doesn't do that. You know, you can talk over people and have two people. Not that you would want to do that all the time, but it sounds more natural than if the conversation just sort of cuts off. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, the mindfulness exercise for me about that, I see that as a blessing because I do tend, when I get excited, to jump in. And I know you know this because you're a great listener. Sometimes the most memorable things are the things that they say after they take a breath. So you think they're done, but then they have this last piece of wisdom that they share. And in a normal situation, this is where the coffee shop thing doesn't work because if we were in Starbucks, we would just be, you know, I would already have my phone out and be showing you a picture of the 2-inch quad tape recorder, and we'd be talking. We'd be zipping, Bing Crosby, David Crosby. We'd be saying, okay, so how many kids did David Crosby father for how many different surrogate moms? You know, we'd be ping ponging back and forth through all that. And in this setting, especially when you're doing video, you do have to have some discipline or it doesn't work.
Well, it's true. And that's the one thing about that phone. And I don't know, I mean, because you lose bits of conversation with that. So that's sort of the downside. I don't know. I've tried to figure out how to override that, but it's built in. You can't. Similarly, we use Skype instead of Zoom for the VE show because Zoom doesn't allow you to record a single video feed. It has the same built-in baffle or whatever you want to call it, where when I speak, the camera switches to my feed. When you speak, the camera switches to your feed. So for my application, if we use Zoom, when I was talking, I'd be looking at myself on the big screen. Right. And it looks ridiculous. It doesn't work. Where with Skype, you can keep the guest's feed continuous, and they'll be sitting there, you know, silent while I'm speaking. And that's why we use Skype, because, you know, we've had people go, oh, why do you use Skype? You know, because it's the old one. But it's the one that works for us. So.
It's good. Well, I mean, and they've continued to make improvements, and the technology, every platform is getting better than it was. But and Skype's great. And now I'm trying to remember, do you get discrete MP3s for each side of the conversation with Skype, so you can record two different channels? Like, am I on one channel and you're on the other?
You can. It'll show a split screen if you do it that way. The option that we use is we full screen the guest, and then I'm recorded in my studio on other cameras, so we don't need my feed.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, we want is the guest shot, so we put that in and we edit it. We just cut it, you know, back and forth like a normal edit.
So this program that we're recording right now will only be of interest to nerds.
Yeah, I think so. Well, it's interesting to us, and you know, I think when you listen to interviews, at least for me, if the people that are talking are genuinely interested in what they're talking about, it draws me in.
Yeah.
You know, because I'm like you, I'm assuming we like to learn things, and we're always fascinated with stuff that we might not be that familiar with. And so, if people are interested in video productions and things like that, then they might find it interesting. If not, they'll switch it off. And
yeah, right. They'll be on to their other podcast, the other 20 podcasts they've got on their podcatcher.
Yeah, I want to go back to music for a second. Have you seen the new Get Back, the Beatles?
Yes.
Okay. What'd you think of it?
I was a little disappointed in it. The way that they hyped it was that there would be a lot of new insights, and I didn't get any real new insights. The record producer, jingle producer in me, because one of the things that I've done along the way is I did own a record label for a while, was fascinated with the process of creation. So I've read Jeff Emerick's book about, he was the engineer behind George Martin,
right?
And understood a lot of the tricks that they did to make. They were breaking ground, and before there were multi-tracks, they would get all of these tape machines and sync them up somehow, so they'd have 4 or 5 of them to buy themselves more tracks for the recordings, and they saved all the tape. That's why Giles has been able to do all these fantastic remixes of the Beatles stuff for the stuff that's going on in Vegas right now, the Love Show.
Oh, okay.
The reason that's so pristine, when you look back, a lot of the guys like Bones Howe had 4 tracks total to work with, so they were bouncing vocals into the left side. This is early Brian Wilson stuff too. If you listen to the duophonic records that we used to get when we were kids, remember how the music was always in the left channel and the voices were in the right? And that was cool for about 2 seconds.
Well, it was cool for me because I would flip it all the way to the instrumentals and then sing along with it.
Yeah. Well, that is, yeah. But what's happened is, and I don't know how they're doing this, but there are some really amazing, remasters of stuff that I thought only came in mono. I mean, I didn't think there was any Dave Clark 5 stuff that was in stereo, but you can find that now. And of course, it's all on YouTube. Everything's all music is on YouTube.
Yeah.
So I just go looking until I find the mix that I remember from back in the day, and the nuances that you hear. I don't know if you did what I did, and that was immediately ran out and bought the Giles Martin remaster of Sgt. Pepper and then Abbey Road. But the quality that's available to us today was not available on vinyl. In fact, they'd had to turn down some of the bass because some of Paul's bass made the needle skip off of the record.
Yeah, I've heard
so
that.
We missed that,
Yeah, it's true. Well, so what was disappointing?
I didn't feel like I learned anything new. And maybe it's because I've been immersed in my era. There were two schools of fandom. There was the Beatle group and there was the Elvis group, and I was part of the Beatle group. I love the British Invasion, Beatles, Beach Boys, Grassroots, were my things. I love the Wrecking Crew. That's the movie that I watch again and again. I don't know if you've seen that one yet, but I mean that is absolutely, for a guy like you would be amazed. First, at the breadth and depth of that canon, the number of hit songs that those guys performed on, and they play a bunch of them at the beginning, and you go, they're on that one, they're on that one, they're on that one, and then they all sit around the table and talk about how they did it. And the bass line for The Beat Goes On, that was Carol Kay freestyling. They didn't like what they had; it didn't sound right, and so basically she put her electric bass on top of the string bass that was pre-recorded and added that second piece. And that made all the magic. And that just stuff just kind of was happening every day in the studio. And I feel like, I don't know how you feel about this, but because, we both create as individuals now. It's so easy to do it because it's all on the computer. But part of what you lose with that is you lose the individual kind of invention that goes on when you have a bunch of really smart, really talented musicians in the same room at the same time. And it's the same way with Motown, right? I mean, the Funk Brothers, if you listen to, and you can listen to a lot of the instrumental-only tracks for the Motown hits, that stuff would be great without any vocals behind it. It's amazingly good.
Yeah.
And those guys were such pros. And when you think about that, they got very rough charts. They did not get note for note stuff all the time from Holland, Dozier, and Holland. That was that was amazing. The magic that was happening then. And to me, stuff today all feels derivative. There's nothing. It was the same way back then. I was listening to Hang On Sloopy, the McCoys. Oh. There's a new stereo mix of that out. Oh, well, their follow-up was Fever, which is a standard, old standard we all know. But it starts with the same boom, 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 boom. And then if you think about Tommy Rowe,
right.
Sweet Pea, Dizzy, same thing. You didn't have a drummer, you wouldn't. And that drummer was Hal Blaine. He was the Wrecking Crew guy, He was doing all that stuff. So that's long way around to answer your question about the Beatle thing. The thing that I liked a lot was I was watching the nuances of the tech stuff about how they were actually technologically making it happen. But I didn't feel like I was seeing getting any new insights into them as individuals. Did you?
Yeah. I'm going to take the other side of it, because for me, that was really what it was about. I mean, aside from the beautiful technical quality, because obviously you've seen the original Let It Be movie, which was awful. Mm-hmm. I mean, in terms of film quality, but also in terms of the way it was cut. When you see the new one versus the old one, I think, who the hell cut the first one? Was it Lindsay Hogg that cut the first one?
I don't know. I'd have to check that out. Yeah, I mean, I was not a big fan of the Let It Be movie.
Oh God, it was awful. It was depressing, and it was dark and dank. And I mean, then the only cuts that they used of any interaction was Paul and George fighting with each other, and it was bad. And then what made it doubly bad was when they released the album with all the Phil Spector stuff that was put on.
Yes.
It's like, so they ruined the film and they ruined the album, and they did it very well. So when I saw the Get Back, I thought, oh, well, thank God, And
you finally got that depth.
They finally got that right. And what I liked was he did it on the calendar. I thought that was a cool thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then, when they end at the part one where, will George come back to the group? Find out next time. And it was just the way that they did that I thought, oh, well, that's brilliant. That's great. Because here was this sort of, drama. And then the whole idea of the clock ticking through the whole thing. Are they going to get it together? Will they make it in time? Are they going to do a live show? And you watch the thing from what it was planned to be to what it ended up. And you obviously saw that they were just tired of it and just wanted to finish it up, meet their contractual requirements, and get the hell out of there. They were pretty much done as a band at that point, which I knew anyways, but to actually see it, because there was a couple of instances in that where Paul said, well, if this is going to be it, or, you know what I mean? They were already talking about it.
Yeah.
They were already in their minds. This was it. This was the downside. The Beatles were just about finished, but they sort of had to do a few things because they were contractually obligated. The other part of the film that I really liked was watching the genesis of a song. Like when Paul creates Get Back, and it starts out as, we don't want any Pakistanis. And it, morphs in, because as a songwriter, I know that's how it's done. But to actually see them do it was brilliant, I thought. And then it also proved my feelings about Lindsay Hogg being the bastard son of Orson Welles. Because when I saw him in that film, I was like, oh yeah, no doubt. He got all of his daddy's DNA. I mean, between the cigar and the kind of pudgy body and the fact that he was a filmmaker, I mean, come on. How much more of Orson Welles' DNA could he get?
It's true. That is really true.
Yeah. So I was happy.
I've been looking as we were talking, and Graham Gilding, who was the editor. There were two editors on the original Let It Be film, and he was one of them. He was more the picture guy, and the other one was more known for his sound work than he was for his video editing. But Graham was part of the team that cut let it the new one, the late one. So I think what you're seeing is the director's vision, and Peter Jackson is amazing. I mean, there's no comparison between what he does and what Michael Lindsay Hogg did back then. I'm trying to remember what else he's famous for. I know he did Brideshead Revisited, but
and
Tinseltown, but
and he had a 10-year affair with Jean Marsh, who played Rose in Upstairs Downstairs. And I think he's most notably famous for being the bastard son of Orson Welles.
And he was mainly a TV guy. I mean, that was
that's why he kept pushing
more of a TV director than a movie guy. So that part was part of it too. Whereas Peter Jackson is this broad, epic storyteller who has the epic band of our generation and all of this great footage to play with. I mean, can you imagine what that must have been like to be sitting in that, that screening room watching that stuff uncut for the first time?
Well, what's interesting to me is that they said they had 60 hours of film, and now we've seen 6. So what are they going to do with the other 54 hours of film? Is this going to go on and on? I mean, I hope it does, because I'd love to sit and watch all 60 hours. I would. That's just
as we know, not all of it's interesting. It's kind of like watching home movies. You wait for the banana peel thing, and then
Well, yes and no, although I'm just such a Beatles fanatic, and obviously there is going to be no more Beatles footage that we know of unless somebody's sitting on it. But this is obviously the holy grail of unseen Beatles footage. So I don't care if they were just all sitting there picking their nose. I just want to see it. Anything I can get my hands on. I don't look at it in the same light as a new Hollywood production. Like if a new Batman comes out or a new Star Wars comes out or something like that, new Mission Impossible, I'm going to be critiquing that at a much different angle than I would be critiquing Beatles footage that's been discovered,
That's and that's interesting. The thing to me that's interesting about reboots is that they're waiting for the next generation that doesn't know a little bit of the backstory, but maybe not a lot. So the originalists like us who remember the golden age of action comics and stuff in the late 60s when all the really cool stuff was happening, that and think of George Reeves as our Superman, as cheesy as that and as poorly produced as that show was. It took me a while to get used to Christopher Reeve in that role. And then I've had trouble keeping track of who was which. I think the guy that's doing it now, he's smart enough to stay with the series and watch it become a metaverse and everything. So that's good. He's going to have a long-term play. But my grandson has no understanding of the institutional memory of that franchise the way that you and I do. So we're looking at it from a different space. It'd be interesting to talk to some youngsters about what their thought it was about Get Back, because I bet you they'd have a whole different point of view than we do.
Well, it depends on the youngster. I'll give you an example. Griffin Tucker, who is a phenomenal musician, who's playing in a band called Classless Act. They're opening for Motley Crue and Def Leppard on their tour, I think this summer. And he's been on my show a couple of times. He's 19 or 20 years old, and there's a great video of him on YouTube when he was about 9 playing Dear Prudence and singing it note for note perfect.
Wow.
So he is an amazing... I'll send you the link. You got to see it. He's this cute little blonde-haired kid, and then you just look at him and go, oh, my God. John didn't even learn how to play that till he was 28,
Well, and he's such a great marketer too. I mean, he's got the rocks ending on his thing. So Griffin Tucker,
you know who I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyways, his take on Get Back was very similar to mine, where he just said, oh, God, it was just incredible just to see them and watch them work. And, nobody cared about the fact that you were ahead of everybody and read everything there was and knew everything that was going to happen. That isn't our fault,
Right.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But
well, and that's kind of like a person who studies a classical music artist who studies Mozart and Beethoven and understands the nuances. Some of that stuff, the reason that's timeless is because the brilliance jumps the generations. It's immediately evident to anybody that's got a musical gene that that's something special. And so for a guy like Griffin Tucker, who does have that gene, I mean, the fact that he could even do that at his age to play Dear Prudence says something about how his brain's wired. So naturally he's gonna have that sense of, the value and the skill and the magic that went into creating that art for those four guys. And that's a gift.
And when I asked Griffin, he was on the show, I asked him who were some of his favorites, and it was all the same as mine. It was like the Beatles, Led Zeppelin. And I was like, wow, how did you get, and then he told me his parents were into it and, so made me feel old.
My grandson listens to my son's music. Yeah, not mine. Definitely.
Yeah. So have you seen that Dear Prudence one or no?
No, I haven't, but I've just bookmarked it. I'm going to go take a look at it after we're done here.
Oh, you found it? Well, you are quick. You are very quick. Yeah.
Yep. I always keep things up because I don't want to. I get so many gifts from the hosts that I'm in the shows that I'm on. These little nuances and stuff, and they find their way into my stories. Yesterday we were out for breakfast, and we were talking about where we were going for dinner with our server, and my wife was very animated about this place, and there was a guy sitting right next to us who didn't understand what was going on in the conversation, and he thought that there was some friction between my wife and I. So he kind of leaned over and he said, "You guys okay?" And as we talk with him, it turns out that his lifestyle is that he's a work from home guy. He's a web developer, so he can be anywhere. So he decided that he figured out what it takes him to live per month. And what he does is he purposes that in a B&B rental. So he lives in a different place in a different state every month.
Wow.
And has picked these places he's always wanted to see, and he goes and rents a B&B there. It's got to have a garage because he likes to keep his top down in his Jeep, and it's got to have internet, right? Because he's got a good internet signal because that's how he makes his living, but he can do it from anywhere. And so I walked out of there, and Colleen says to me, she says, "I can see that look on your face. You've got a protagonist that's going to be living that lifestyle. Tell me what happened to make your guy want to move from place to place and not stay." Because it's not really a Jack Reacher story in that way. It's some guy that's in a city for a month and what happens to him. So that for the last 24 hours has been rolling around in my creative mind to see if I can come up with a scenario or a plot line that would be interesting to go with that.
Well, it's going to have to be something bad like Jack Reacher, because if it's just some guy who wants to be a vagabond, let's face it, that's not all that interesting.
Yeah. Well, I think the cool thing about it is that you have an instant fan base in every one of those cities. Wherever you decide to drop this guy for however long he's going to be, especially, all the guys in Flagstaff when Vega came out that I worked with, they all, that there was a rush of book sales as they all bought them, and I still hear from them out there, the guys in the National Park Service and stuff that helped me about what I got right, what I got wrong, but they have the vivid recollection. They know mile marker 99 and the Colorado River, where the Crystal Rapid is the most dangerous rapid in the whole run there. And, they identify with that because they've seen it. They've run it. They've been in a float boat going down that thing. And I love that. I love to try and the second book, Chasing the Captain of Jess's, ended up being in London because Jessica, the Twitter star, the majority of her cop fans live in the UK. And I don't know how this happened, but they love her over there. And so they were writing to her and saying, have Terry put you in the UK for the next book. So the whole second act happens in London. We end up in Moscow for the third act, but and I had I had a dozen technical consultants, I guess you'd call them, guys that I owe beers to next time I'm over there, that were giving me places where all the scenes that happen over there happen in real places. Belmarsh Prison is a real place. The bar outside of which the two UK cops get jumped by the bad guys is a real place. There's actually a film studio that they have a fight against the wall of this film studio. So there's part of what there is in my gift pack for people who want to do a book group over there in the UK is I have a Jessica Ramirez guided tour. So if you want to see all the places that she was or that the story took place in the UK, you can go. There's not many. I mean, there's maybe a half dozen locations, but that's part of the thing. This is what I like about guys like Griffin is that if you look on his website, the 4 key icons are there: YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Yeah. He's active on those 4 platforms. You see those brands, they're there.
Yeah.
And he knows where to go. And I think that's the big challenge for a lot of us that are in the writing profession nowadays is that we came into it thinking that all we'd have to do is tell stories. We didn't realize that we were going to have to go out and sell a brand.
Well, you never used to. I mean, that's why you had a manager. But, unfortunately, what was it? Elvis Costello's song, Video Killed the Radio Star. Well, the internet killed the manager.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the new, the ability. Amazon is killing the big publishers. I'm seeing some trickles of people leaving the big houses because they want control.
I think it's more than just the manager. I mean, YouTube killed NBC essentially. If you want to look at it that way, there's elements of this we could go through. Spotify killed Capitol Records.
Yep. Well, it all comes back. This is what you're so good at. It all comes back to just creating compelling content. It's where you purpose it. When I talk to my radio guys, they all bemoan the fact that radio is not a thing anymore. Well, radio still is a thing. It's now called a podcast because all the online stuff that happened in between the songs is just stapled together into a podcast by the same morning crew. And that's what when we create these characters that we write about. When I built Jess, I was thinking graphic novel for her. I was thinking who are the stars today that are Latina rock stars in the Hollywood constellation that would want to be her and that would want to take that book on. My friend our Franklin James just got a lifetime movie deal. She's going to has a 3-part series I think coming on in March if I remember right. I got to look it up. But that happened out of the blue because somebody liked her series, who was a star, passed the book on to another star who passed it to a producer who said, yeah, let's run with this. And so she got a call one night out of the blue that she was sure was going to swing into, have you thought about renewing your auto insurance, where they said, we'd really like to negotiate the rights with you for your story to put it on TV. So, I mean, that's what we have to think about as storytellers. No matter what it is. I mean, you're a storyteller in your own way. When you bring us together, we're trying to create content that's going to be meaningful for your audience. We have to figure out what the best way is to purpose it.
That's absolutely true. And on that note, we got to wrap this interview up because we've run just to the end of time. Students in Time is your latest book. My guest is Terry Shepard. The book is out and available now?
It sure is, Douglas. Everything's available at Amazon.com. Thanks a million for having me on. I always love our conversation.